the old Roman Empire somewhere. Now some will say, well, but America, we're an extension of the Roman Empire. You know, we came out of these nations of Europe, but I don't think that's what it's saying. I think he's going to come from somewhere within the Roman Empire. Europe, North Africa, the western part of Asia, those were the parameters of the old Roman Empire. There's another group out there that asked the question, could he be a Muslim? In fact, a lot of people are saying he may be the Mahdi, that they're expecting when he comes. The problem with that is, according to Daniel 11, the Antichrist is going to exalt himself, the Bible says, above every god. And he's going to declare himself to be God. In 2 Thessalonians 2:4, it says he's going to exalt himself above every god and declare himself to be God. Well, a Muslim can't declare himself to be God because the major tenet of Islam is there is one God who is Allah. And so no man could proclaim to be God. If he said he was God, then he would, by necessity, not be a follower of Islam anymore because he'd be violating the major tenet of it. Now, he could be someone who used to be a follower of Islam, or he could be someone who used to be involved in Christianity or any other religion. But he's going to be one who's going to declare that he himself is God. And the Islamic Mahdi will not come and declare that he is God. He's going to declare that he's a servant of God or of Allah. So to me, the fact that the Antichrist declares himself God and is worshipped by the world eliminates the idea that he could be a Muslim, at least while he is declaring himself to be God. So I don't hold to either one of those ideas, an American Antichrist, an Islamic Antichrist. But he's going to appear, this Antichrist is, at the beginning as a great peacemaker. He's going to bring the new Pax Romana. And again, ever since 1948, what is one president after another and one secretary of state after another worn themselves out trying to do? Trying to get peace. Where Jimmy Carter, had, Sadat, together, and Begin, I think it was, and then Clinton in 1993 had Rabin and Arafat there on the lawn of the White House. These Oslo Accords. They have these big deals, and what happens? It falls apart. Hillary Clinton right now is working on trying to get a peace over there. And I'm not against trying to do that in the meantime, but I'm just saying none of them are going to pull it off. But when he comes, he's going to be Times Man of the Year. He's going to get the Nobel Peace Prize because he's going to do something that no one else has been able to do. And if we don't see the stage being set for that today, then what else is there? That's what the world wants. Let me give you a sixth signpost, and that is the Battle of Gog and Magog. If you have your Bible, turn to Ezekiel 38. Ezekiel 38. It says in Ezekiel 38 in verse 1, "And the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face toward Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh and Meshech and Tubal." It goes on down in verse 5 and says Persia and Ethiopia and Put. Verse 6, Gomer with all its troops, Beth Togarmah. It's giving these nations of this great alliance. And by the way, this is a great point. You probably couldn't figure this out. Great Bible scholars. Ezekiel 38 comes after Ezekiel 37. I know that's a great point there. But what's Ezekiel 37 about? Regathering of Israel. The dry bones coming together. Them coming together as a nation. What happens after they get together as a nation? Ezekiel 38 and 39, they're attacked by this coalition of nations that are listed here. And you'll notice the names here. It's Rosh or Roosh, which I take as Russia. There was an ancient group of people way north called the Ras or the Rasapu. Meshech, Tubal, Gomer, and Togarmah, all of those are in what today is modern-day Turkey. And people used to say, well, now Turkey's never going to join this because they were an ally of Israel. What's happened in the last couple of years? They've turned against Israel. Remember that flotilla that came in that Israel had problems with? There's a lot. It was Turkish. And the Turks have now kicked Israel out of there. They won't let them do any military exercises. In the last 2 months, both Newsweek and Time have had major articles in there about how Turkey is going back to the east. They're getting alliances with Russia, with Iran. They're turning back to their Islamic roots. So we see that happening before our eyes. There's the slide I've got there. I call this the final jihad. You'll notice Israel, and look at how these nations encircle them. You got Cush, which is modern-day Sudan, which is Islamic. You have Put, which is modern-day Libya. It could be a little further over. I didn't have room on my map. It's modern-day Libya, which is a radical Islamic nation. You've got Turkey now moving back to the east. You've got Russia. You've got Iran. You know, they call him Ahmad Genocide or, Ahmadinejad Jihad or all these different names you can come up for. But they're looking for their Mahdi to come back in Iran, and Ahmadinejad's trying to hotwire the apocalypse. He's trying to make it happen. And he wants to wipe the Jewish people off the face of the earth. They're mentioned here in Ezekiel 38, verse 5, Persia. The name just became Iran in 1935, and then the Islamic Republic of Iran in 1979. So we see these nations here coming together. Did you notice on this map, though, in Ezekiel 38, none of the near enemies of Israel are mentioned? Isn't that interesting? It doesn't mention Egypt or Syria or Lebanon or Jordan. Those are the nations that are called, they're the near enemies. These are the far enemies of Israel. Now, people say, well, why is that? Well, it could include the near enemies. It could just be given the outer donut, if you will, and it includes everything within. Or it could be that those inner ring of Israel's enemies have already been destroyed by the time this invasion takes place. There could be some other type of war where those other nations are destroyed. We don't know for sure, but we know that these nations here are going to come against Israel in the end times. And all of these nations in Ezekiel 38, and this was written 2,600 years ago. Ezekiel wrote the names of these nations down. They're going to attack Israel someday when they're regathered to their land and when they're living at peace. Well, they're regathered now. The whole world's trying to figure out how to get them peace over there. And it says when that takes place, these nations are going to come against Israel. And I place this invasion during the first half of the tribulation, because that's when Israel's going to be living under that peace treaty with Antichrist. There's only 2 times in the future that we know Israel's going to have peace. One's in the millennium. I don't think this is going to happen then. Jesus Christ will be ruling on the earth. The other time's during the first 3.5 years of the tribulation. So that's when I think this event's going to take place. So we haven't seen this fulfilled, but again, what do we see today? The stage being set. All of these nations here in Ezekiel 38 are identifiable nations with the desire to attack Israel. They're all forming alliances with each other. And the Bible says someday they're going to pour down into the land of Israel, and God is going to wipe them out. He's going to destroy these nations. You can go on and read about it at the end of chapter 38 and 39. Well, let me give the 7th major signpost, and that is globalism, the Antichrist world empire. Now think about this with me for a second. After Ezekiel 38 and 39, in the first half of the tribulation sometime, when all these Islamic armies in Russia come into Israel and are wiped out by God, that's going to leave a massive power vacuum in the world, isn't it? Well, who's going to fill it? I think the Antichrist is going to step forward and fill it. So I think that's one of the things that's going to catapult him to his world power. And he's going to break his treaty then with Israel. But think about our world today. It's globalism. The 90s were called the decade of globalization. How did our world start after the flood? After the flood, God told the people to scatter all over the earth. What did they do? They shook their fist in God's face and said, we're not scattering. In fact, we're going to go to one place called Babel, and we're going to build a tower there that reaches up into the heavens. And they said there, we're going to make a name for ourselves. Isn't it interesting when you go over to a couple of chapters later with Abraham, God tells Abraham, Abraham, I will make your name great. Big difference in life, isn't it? If God making your name great, or you trying to make a name for yourself. That's what they wanted to do. God scattered them all over the face of the earth. Remember at Babel, they were all there under one man named Nimrod. All the world was there gathered under one ruler. God scatters people all over the earth. And what has been happening through time, down through the centuries? Been coming back more and more. We've gone from tribalism to nationalism. Now we're back to globalism. Satan's trying to get it all back to one group again where he can rule it all by one man. Isn't that amazing? And where's headquarters of the Antichrist going to be according to Revelation 17 and 18? Babylon. It's all going to come back to that place. It's all going to come full circle. Satan is the master globalist, because he wants to dominate and rule the world. And everything we see today is towards globalism. You know, we have all the tools for world domination today. We got long-range missiles, global positioning satellites, one world economy that's coming. Right after the great economic collapse at the end of 2008, the G20 nations got together immediately, and there was all the talk, Gordon Brown of Europe, Henry Kissinger, they were all talking about a global New Deal to bring the economies of the world together and strengthen them so that we couldn't have the kind of collapse and the domino effect that had taken place before. What I think is going to happen is the economy is going to continue to be unstable, and sometime in the future, maybe after the rapture, we certainly know in the third seal judgment, when it takes everything you can make all day just to buy a loaf of bread, that there's going to be world economic collapse. And what happens when the economy collapses? People look to anybody who can save them. I mean, think about Germany in the 1930s. They gave their nation over to a madman, to Adolf Hitler. Why? Because of the runaway inflation, hyperinflation they had in Weimar Germany. So the world's going to be looking to somebody to bring order out of the chaos. And we're going to see a one-world economy, a one-world government, and ultimately a one-world religion. And we see everything moving that way. When I look at our world today, things in our world are shaping up exactly the way we should expect them to be shaping up according to the Bible. I mean, everything's coming together. Now, some people might say, well, there's always been signs of the times. People have always talked about them. What's different today? There's two things that are different today, I believe. And I believe you can show this demonstrably. First of all, these things are converging like never before. Israel, 1900 years, they were gone. They come back as a nation in 1948. Europe, broken up for 1600 years, begins to come back together in 1957. World focus on the Middle East just in the last few decades. The desperate cry for peace in the Middle East. The rise of Russia and radical Islam. Radical Islam really just began with the Islamic Revolution in 1979. The globalism that we see. All of these things happening within a few decades. And not only do we see a convergence of these things, but we see an acceleration of these events. It's like everything's on fast forward. Because today, when something happens in another part of the world, everybody knows about it immediately, don't we? I'm from Oklahoma, and you think about, we had the Oklahoma land run in 1889. Think about some guy that lived in Oklahoma in 1889. You think about if there was a big war over in Europe. He could care less, right? Probably didn't know what was even going on, but if it was going on, what did it affect him for? He was farming his 160 acres. It had no relevance to his life whatsoever. Today, something happening in the Middle East or in Europe or in China, it has a ripple effect, and things are accelerated because we immediately know about them. And so there's the impact of them, it really is just accelerated exponentially in our culture today. So we live in this time of preparation, but it's very important to remember this. This is a key point. All these signs we've talked about, they're signs over here of the second coming. They're not signs of the rapture. The rapture doesn't have any signs. These are signs of the second coming. Now, if we can already see the signs of the second coming and the rapture hadn't happened yet, what does that tell us? Rapture's probably pretty soon. It's like the illustration, I think I used it the other day with you all, but it's like with Christmas. There's a lot of signs for Christmas. You can see that it's coming. Thanksgiving really doesn't have many signs to it. And if you can already see the signs of Christmas, and it's not even Thanksgiving yet, then you can know that Thanksgiving's pretty close. And that's the way it is with the rapture. These are signs of the second coming of the Messiah. But we can see them now, the stage being set. And so the coming of the Lord could be very, very soon. And the question for all of us today is, are we ready? Heard a story a while back about a young couple got set up on a date, blind date, and they were supposed to meet at 7. He was supposed to come pick her up at her house, and 7 o'clock comes, 8 o'clock comes, 9 o'clock. He still hadn't showed up, so she thinks she's been stood up. So she goes in and takes her clothes off, puts on her pajamas, and lets her hair down and takes off her makeup, sits down on the sofa with her some popcorn to watch her favorite show with her dog. Well, about a few minutes later, here's this knock on the door. And she opens the door, and this young man looks at her, and she looks at him. They're both shocked, and he looks at her, and he says, I'm 2 hours late, and you're still not ready yet? You'll get it in a second. But that's the way it is with the coming of the Lord, really, isn't it? You know, he hasn't come. He didn't come in the 40s. He didn't come in the 50s.